Hey everyone, Eric here. So I want you to picture something for me. Imagine you're standing at the bottom of this absolutely massive mountain. The peak is so high up you can't even see it. Now that mountain, that's your biggest goal. It could be launching that startup you've been dreaming about, or maybe hitting a huge career milestone. Whatever it is, it feels, well, impossible, right? You look up and just think, how am I ever going to get up there?
Yeah, we've all got one. That huge, intimidating goal that just seems completely out of reach. So take a second. Seriously, what's your impossible mountain? Got it? Good. Because today we're not just going to stare at it. We're going to give you the map, the tools, and the climbing gear to actually start making your way to the top.
All right, so here's our roadmap for today's climb. First, we're going to completely shatter that whole idea of impossible. Then we'll dive into the science of motivation. That's your fuel. After that, we'll break down the peak performance cycle. That's your route. Then I'll give you a daily toolkit, which is your gear. And finally, we'll talk about how to take that very first step.
Let's kick things off with the most critical piece of the puzzle, your mindset. Because honestly, what we think is impossible is usually just a wall in our own heads that's just waiting to be knocked down. A classic example of this is the 4-minute mile. For decades, scientists and experts all said it was physically impossible for a human to run a mile that fast. Their bodies just couldn't handle it. But then, in 1954, this guy Roger Bannister went out and did it. Now here's the crazy part. Once he broke that barrier, dozens of other runners did it within the next year. So what gives? Did humans suddenly evolve in 12 months? No way. The only thing that changed was the belief in what was possible. That mental barrier was gone, and that just opened the floodgates.
And this is a core idea from Stephen Kotler, whose work is the basis for this whole explainer. He spent his entire career studying the world's absolute top performers. We're talking elite athletes, Nobel-winning scientists, groundbreaking entrepreneurs. And what he found is that these people aren't superhuman. They're not geniuses. They've just figured out that there's a formula to do the impossible.
Okay, so if impossible is just a story we tell ourselves, the next question is, what do we need to start the climb? Well, we need fuel. And it turns out not all motivation is created equal. You need the right kind. Basically, motivation comes in two main flavors. First, you've got extrinsic motivation. This is the stuff that comes from the outside: money, fame, a promotion, or even fear. And look, it works, but it's like cheap, low-grade gas. It'll get you started, but it burns out really fast. Then you have intrinsic motivation. This comes from inside you, from things like genuine curiosity, passion, and a sense of purpose. This is the high-grade rocket fuel you need for the long haul. So what's in this premium fuel? Well, Kotler breaks it down into 5 key ingredients. It all starts with curiosity. That curiosity then evolves into a focused passion. And eventually, that passion connects to something bigger than yourself, and that becomes your purpose. Now, that whole engine is supercharged by 2 other things: autonomy, which is having control over your work, and mastery, which is that amazing feeling of just getting better at something. But here's the key, and this is super important: the order matters a lot. Kotler calls this the golden path. It's a sequence. You start with curiosity, that leads you to a passion, and that passion eventually helps you find a purpose. So the takeaway here is, don't stress about finding your grand life purpose tomorrow. Just start by following whatever you're genuinely curious about today. That's how you build an unstoppable drive. Okay, so you've got your high-grade fuel. Now you need the map. This is really the heart of the entire system. It's a 4-stage cycle that helps you unlock a state of peak performance that you've probably heard of called flow. Now, we've all heard people talk about being in the zone or in a flow state. But here's the single biggest mistake people make. They think you can just switch it on. You can't. Flow isn't something you start with. It's the result of a process. It's the reward you get for doing the other steps right. And this is that process. It's a cycle with 4 clear stages: struggle, release, flow, and recovery. And you can't skip any of them. It's a loop that you have to go through over and over again to keep pushing your limits. So let's break down each one. First up is the struggle phase. And let's be real, this part kind of sucks. It's that feeling of frustration when you're just hitting a wall over and over. You're trying to learn a new skill or solve a tough problem, and you're just stuck. But here's what's actually happening. That feeling of difficulty is literally your brain building new neural connections. It's growing. So you have to learn to embrace that feeling. No struggle, no flow. So after you've been struggling for a while, you get to the most counterintuitive part of the whole cycle: release. This is where you have to consciously step away from the problem.
I'm serious. Go for a walk, take a shower, listen to some music, do anything that takes your mind off of it. This gives your subconscious brain the space it needs to work in the background and connect the dots. And what happens when you do that? Well, you earn your way into phase 3, flow. This is the payoff. All of a sudden, that problem you were stuck on, the solution just pops into your head. Your work feels effortless, time seems to melt away, and you're performing at your absolute best. This is that peak state we're all after, and you get it by earning it through struggle and release.
And finally, we have what is probably the most overlooked stage of all, recovery. You see, being in a flow state is actually incredibly demanding on your brain and your body. You burn a ton of energy. You have to recharge. And while taking breaks is good, high-quality sleep is absolutely non-negotiable. Sleep is when your brain actually locks in everything you learned and turns it into long-term skill.
Okay, so we've got our mindset, we've got our fuel, and we've got our map. Now let's talk about the actual climbing gear, the specific tools you can start using every single day to put this into practice. Tool number 1 is the curiosity checklist. This ties right back to building that intrinsic motivation. It's incredibly simple but really powerful. Once a week, just sit down and write a list of 25 things you're curious about. Anything goes, no filter, no judgment. After you've done this for a few weeks, go back and look for patterns. What topics keep showing up? Those are massive clues pointing you toward your passion.
All right, our second tool is all about a single, very important number, 4%. So what on earth could that possibly mean?
Well, it's about finding the perfect balance between the challenge of a task and your current skill level. Think about it. If something is way too easy, you get bored. But if it's way too hard, you get anxious and you just give up. The sweet spot for growth, the channel that actually triggers a flow state, is when the challenge is just about 4% harder than what you can already do. Not too hard, not too easy, just right.
So, we've gone through the mindset shift, the fuel for motivation, the 4-stage process, and the daily tools. Now let's bring it all together and figure out how to take that very first step up your own impossible mountain.
So here it is, the entire formula in a nutshell. First, you need motivation. That's your high-quality, intrinsic fuel, and your action is to find it by following that path from curiosity to passion to purpose. Second, you need a process. That's the 4-stage flow cycle. Your action is to just keep repeating that loop: struggle, release, flow, recovery. And finally, you need action. And that means creating daily micro-challenges for yourself by applying that 4% rule.
And really, that's what this all comes down to. It's not about conquering the whole mountain tomorrow. Forget the summit for a second. Just focus on the very next step. So I'll leave you with this question. What is the first 4% challenge that you're going to tackle today?
And there you have it, a practical formula for turning the impossible into the possible. If this explainer gave you some clarity on how to start your own climb, it would be awesome if you could hit that like button, subscribe for more content like this, and maybe share it with someone else who's staring up at their own mountain. And hey, let us know in the comments what you want to learn about next. Thanks for hanging out. I'm Eric, and I'll see you in the next one.